Welcome back to the Berg Podcast. Thanks for joining us today. With me today is Dan.
Hey, everybody.
And Ford.
Hey, how's it going?
And today we're talking about choosing your clients, right? So a lot of times, I think the perception is, at least from some of our folks, that we take any job that rolls through the door or comes across the street. And the reality is we do sort of try and think through who we ideally want to work with, because just like when we're choosing our employees or going through that recruiting process, recruiting our clients or looking for the types of work we do, it's not necessarily anything and everything.
No, it's not, and it's not the obvious. It's not necessarily the closest job. It's not necessarily the job with somebody that we absolutely worked with and have, known over the years. It's not necessarily the scope being exactly right for us. Those things can factor in, but the owner or client or engineer, whoever you're working for, general contractor, the relationship, who they are as a company is really become increasingly important to us as a company, to know what it is that we want to be and how we want to get the work done and how we want to interact, and then see if that's somebody that we think we can work well with. Because then the reality is you can be more aggressive in the bid. You can be more proactive in trying to provide solutions and answers. You can be more direct and transparent in conversation. So all of those things are based on a mutually beneficial relationship between the owner and the contractor, regardless of what you're contracting. Yeah. So that's really become important as we've grown.
So if you boil it down to its very basic, we do kind of two different types of work, right? Public and private, right? I mean, at its very like base level. Do you get the choice in both?
I think you do. I think you do. But you get in very different ways. So in public work, you have to be low to win. So what happens is we tend to win in places where we're comfortable. And not comfort from a bad sense, but comfort like I believe that owner is somebody that I can interact with and can understand and appreciate the situation that I might be in, or the problem that might have occurred, or the thing that wasn't on the plans. And it lets you go in more confidently, more aggressively as a bidder, as an estimator, to say, I'm going to turn up my production rates. This is a little unclear on this spec, but I'm going to assume that we can do it in the way that it would be the best possible way to do it, not maybe exactly the way not the safest way. And vice versa, when we lose a public job, a lot of times, it's because we look at it and there's some questions and we're not sure of the answers. And we don't feel safe enough to say like, okay, let's bid it based on what we think the answer is. Instead, we say, let's bid it based on worst case scenario of what the answer could be. And then, you have 5 other bidders and 1 or 2 of those other bidders doesn't see it that way. They say, you know what, we're going to bid it the way that's the best possible way for us. And then they get a more aggressive number and they win. So in the public sector, it might be easier to bid that way actually, because it's conscious. You're just manipulating production rates and how you do means and methods to change the price.
For clarifying, he was saying the safest route, not as in safety for the work. You mean as far as
we're not going to take an unsafe.
No, he meant the
route,
safety in that when he bids, you put extra protection in because you don't think you can get something done.
No, I did.
But
I meant protecting.
We're going to have to bring Blair back on the podcast.
No, exactly.
We're going to have to talk about safety.
I'm on a run here. A couple weeks ago, I had, I made you awkward. I was uncomfortable, made you awkward. I'm on a run here. But yes, that is what I meant.
Yeah.
When you're building a bid and you go in as the estimator, you deliver that as the employee, you deliver that as an estimator to either Ford or myself, depending on who's bidding. And if I'm bidding it, I would give it to Ford. If somebody else is bidding, a lot of times I see it.
Yeah.
And I'm evaluating how much protection you have. How much have you accounted for everything? How aggressive are your production rates? How aggressive are the fluff rates on the materials, or the ton to cubic yard conversion on stone, or all these specific items. So industry-wise, we sort of label that like how safe you were. How much did you protect yourself from a bidding standpoint against the unknown? And the safer you feel, the more comfort you feel with a client, the more easily you then reduce that level of safety and say, I do not have to protect myself against the unknown because they will be reasonable.
Yeah. So we've talked a handful of times about sort of a philosophy that we use when we're looking for work or our next opportunities or other opportunities, right? And a lot of times we're picking things based on working with someone that we know, doing something we know, somewhere we know, right? Those three criteria. Um, and would you say that like the most important potentially is is it someone we know?
100%.
Yeah, right. Because the something we know is sort of like the tangible piece of it. Like if we're doing something we know within our means, with equipment we own and personnel with that it's knowledgeable, the something we know is probably like I think usually like the least variable component of the three.
Well, and it comes down to communication a lot too, because the reality is that, funny, we'll reference another podcast, but Construction Genius had a guy on the other day,
Yeah.
and he was actually talking about. He said he said owners need to be on site or in communication with somebody. We'll call owners everybody, whether it's the GC or the
Right.
whoever,
The
but
person responsible.
person that's going to write the checks,
Yeah, there you
right?
go.
They have to be on site at least 2 to 3 times a week.
Mm.
Just so they can see what's going on, how it's progressing. They can see the issues, because if they aren't aware of the issues and then we have to communicate them, it can look like it's a chance for us to make extra money. And while there is actually extra dollars involved, it's because there's extra work involved, because there was an issue somewhere along the line. And so someone being there on the regular basis and having that open communication, they can see it coming. We can see it coming, and we're both trying to figure out the best solution, versus if they're not aware, or if they're on Zoom from somewhere else and they just can't get a real handle on what's going on that job site, it makes it a huge challenge for everybody, because there's just more adversarial, conversations versus like, hey, we see this problem coming in our future here. We both see it. Let's try and find a remedy as quickly as possible and move on from there.
Yeah. For when you started, like, 19, 20 years ago, something like that.
I thought you were going to say 1920. I was like,
when you started doing this in 1920,
When the Model T came out.
you look great for 103.
some of your earliest clients
Mhm.
actually developed because it was friends, right? Or
Right.
people that you had close connections with that needed a solution, and you're like, hey, I could do that, right?
But yeah, 90% of them.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how has that transpired as we've developed as an organization to say, like, what do we look for in that client relationship?
Well, I mean, during the bidding phase, it's the open communication again, because there are certain people out there that maybe can't be responsive, and so as you're bidding something and you're having questions, you want someone that's going to communicate, because you're both at that point, you feel more like you're looking for a solution than just something else. That's why some of our clients have been with us for this whole time, and that's great, because there's a trust level built up from both sides that allows for open communication and trust that both sides are trying to do the best thing for the project to get the job done and, cost effective. So, I mean, that's something that you build over time. It doesn't magically happen. It does, that's why we love to see repeat customers, because we already know the players. We'll gladly take on new customers, but at the same time,
Right.
the more times you get to work with someone and get to know them on a human level, you can better perform for them, because you can understand what they're looking for. Because a lot of times, years ago, we were doing snow on a project, and the first time we didn't understand this, and I think it was about the third time we went to look at a job with them, and they had this piece of paper that said, this is all the stuff we want done. And the first question we had was, I don't want what's on the paper. I want to know about, where does the vice president park, or where's the door, like the side door that's not marked on your plan, but everybody goes out maybe for a smoke break, because those are the things that are going to be more important than what your requirements ask for.
Right. The things that trigger pain points
Right.
for the owner, for the person writing the check.
Exactly.
Right. Those are the things that are important in understanding that
Right.
process.
Because they didn't say that. I remember there was a site
Right.
job we were doing, and got some feedback from the client's client that they were really upset. And I didn't really understand why, but what it was the construction entrance. They came out on the weekend to look at the site, and they were not wearing safety approved shoes, aka something's, and there was mud, and they got their shoes muddy. So to them, that was an aggravational point. Now, that wasn't in anything that we were supposed to do. I mean, we had a construction entrance, we had everything in, but we didn't realize that they like to come out and look on the job site on the weekend.
Mhm.
So every Friday, we'd freshen up the construction entrance so they could walk up to their job site and look around. I mean, they're the one writing the check, so gladly they could do it. But
Right.
again, that's a small thing that's not there until you've dealt with them and understand that that is something that they're looking for. And, you know, they would never write it down. They would never ask for it. It's just something you have to kind of learn through time.
Yeah. You know, I was thinking like bid language can be an interesting one to navigate at times, right? I mean, everyone's trying to defer liability. They're trying to make someone else hold the bag at the end of the day if something goes wrong. But are there times where we've looked through bid language and you can tell the difference, right? Someone who's trying to protect themselves and someone who's trying to hide something or not be transparent about what's supposed to happen, right?
There's been multiple times. I remember one years ago, we bid a job. We were awarded the job. We got out to the pre-con, and the engineer for the job goes, "What are those?" And I was like, "Those are the prints I bid off of." And they're like, "Oh, the job's been revised 4 times since then, and they never got either." At this point, I still believe that the GC didn't get them either, but someone had never got those new prints. So then the whole way through the job, we were fighting over every change order because we had bid on the original set and there had been some material changes to the project. That, the owner, we've never worked for him again because, that's happened. But you just kind of learn through that, or you read some of that language where, we won't say because it's legally easy and put everybody to sleep, but there's some code words that they put into certain things that that they're looking to try and, put somebody out of business. Really was what they're hoping that someone doesn't pay attention to it.
Yeah, for sure. What about like reputation? So we work primarily as a subcontractor, right? We do mostly subcontract for GCs. We do a little bit of prime work for owners directly. We don't do a lot of GC type work ourselves. Does a person's reputation, an owner or a GC's reputation, come into play when it's not someone you've had the chance to work with?
Well, yeah. I mean, we're always communicating with our vendors. We're communicating with other people in the industry, and sometimes people have a bad time, and we've had bad time with clients before, and we've had to look in the mirror and realize that it was us. So at that point, we weren't the ones that were in the right spot to be the right fit for them, and we might take them again. But you're always hearing about there's certain companies out there that have challenge working with people, and so you try and stay away from them as best you can because the word on the street might be 75% truth, but there's that, if there's, what do they say? If there's smoke, there's fire somewhere. So you try and protect yourself because this work is too difficult to do.
Yeah.
To have that much of an extra fight.
Right. How have they treated other subs that they've worked with? Right. I mean, there are GCs out there who get the reputation of, literally it's their sole purpose in life just to beat their subs up. Right. They're just trying to get an extra buck here, not pay for something there, whatever it might be. So how have they treated themselves? That's kind of important to us.
The other thing here is, how we talk about that you don't learn a lot from winning. I mean, like, I love to win, but you don't necessarily learn a lot. You learn a lot when something goes wrong, when it doesn't go as you plan, when you have to, come up with a new plan. And some of the relationships that we're building, I believe they will continue to grow. And they were built out of something going wrong. It was built out of, we realized there was a problem. It didn't go well. And at times it cost us money, or it cost them money, or it cost us both money, or, it just was an unhappy client. But with an open path for communication and honesty between us, we can step away from it and say, okay, that didn't go well, but we're willing to do this again because we don't think it was intentional and you don't believe it was intentional. It didn't work perfect. You're not going to do this work and it always go perfect.
Yeah.
Well, right. It's like trial by fire right there because you know what? They saw that you still honored what you were supposed to do, whether it was good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
You got it done. And I mean, I think that's one thing that, like we're back to the public. A lot of them say, like, have you ever not finished a job? And it's like, no, I don't think there's ever been a chance where it's like, well, we will get through this one way. There's only one way through and we got to keep going forward. And so, we've had some clients that actually come back that we thought that we kind of had closed that door, and they've actually come back because of the fact that they're like, hey, you just did what it was a bad job. It was a bad job for everybody. But you know what? Let's try this again and see if we can keep it going in a more positive direction.
Yeah, and Brian sort of asked the question, and we didn't finish it. Ford, do you have an opinion as far as, I believe that it can impact public, how we bid, based on the relationship and all those sort of things. In private, I mean, I think it happens there as well, but I think it might happen earlier in private. Do you sort of agree with that? Because of the way private bidding goes, that it's not a single bid.
I think it starts earlier, but I think it also, like with public, you got one shot at the apple, and when that bid opening happens, you know exactly where you stand. Now, how you got to where you stand depends on, like you said, the comfort with the location, the comfort with the people drawing the plans, the comfort with, whoever that owner might be, just knowing, how they've dealt with people, again, just from hearing things through the grapevine. But I think that in private, it's in the very beginning, but then it's at the very end too, because those jobs are not hard bid. They have negotiation in them. So you might be happy on the front end, but then when you get down to the nitty gritty at the end, there might still be a spot there where there's a challenge that you don't want to cross. I still remember my dad was working for a GC years ago, and he got his first subcontractor agreement. Because before that, you shook hands, you did the work, you got paid. There was no, he got the first subcontractor agreement, and he just signed it because he's like, well, I have to do that to work with them. And I remember the one time we were working for somebody, and we got a 60-page subcontractor agreement. And even the subcontract agreement is a negotiation. Nothing is ever done until autographs are in place.
Right.
So, there's still communication there. It's not take it or leave it. Usually there's usually some give and take. Maybe there's some things you would like to see in there that you don't get. Maybe there's some things in there that they want that they can have some leniency on, depending on what it is, retainage or different things that they can work with you on. Because at the end, getting the project done and getting it completed, whether it's on time or on budget or whatever the target is, that is the most important thing for that job. And all the rest of it is details. Sometimes the details become liability, and sometimes the details become benefits for people.
Yeah. I was listening to that. It might have been a different Eric Anderton episode, but he was talking a little bit about this, who you know, what you know, philosophy. And he said something like, that who you know, what you know, where you know, or something along those lines. He said, it's his opinion that 80 to 90% of your job should fall into the category of all three. And it got me thinking a little bit yeah, that'd be awesome, right? If 90% of the work we did was a place we knew, doing exactly what we knew with someone that we've already known or have worked with in the past, that'd be awesome. But we're not always that fortunate, right? Because if you never worked with someone that you didn't know, you'd be really limiting yourself to the group of people that you'd be willing to work for. So, all right, can you think of some examples of lessons that we've learned maybe in working for someone that we didn't know, and how it's worked out well, and how we've maybe, I won't say not worked out well, but maybe we've adjusted?
Yeah, for me, there's one job, and it's not a common one, but it was a small job, and it's one Forge reference, and where we have not worked for this GC again, but not because I wouldn't, because once we were open enough and honest with ourselves enough to step back and look at the job, we realized that we had allowed them to do what a GC is built to do in a bad sense, but also we'd put ourselves in a position where they were probably justified to do it. We weren't prepared enough. We weren't, we didn't have enough people on the ground. We didn't have there was all these little items. We didn't have a big enough machine, whatever it was. And we opened the door up for them to do it. And, in essence, we delivered the job on time and on budget, but not on profit, because it cost us too much money to do it, but that was our own fault. Right. So there's a few of those times that I can think of it, and I don't want to call out specific jobs or people or owners, GCs,
right? But
where that's happened, and you have to step back and say, okay, that one's on us.
Right.
That's.
I mean, there's been times where, and this is not in our recent past, but in our little more distant past, where we just were not sophisticated enough to do things from a process and procedure standpoint the way that they demanded, right? And I know you and I have talked about examples before where we did the work, we did it to their expectations, and we even thought we did it at their direction, but we didn't sort of play the paperwork game well enough and document it in an appropriate way. And when it came down to the finishing and the closeout of the job, there were some things that they said they weren't paying for because we hadn't.
Well, I mean, even now,
right,
you know, again,
So-
with being transparent, which I like to do as much as we can, you know, we don't talk about specific jobs, but,
Right.
you know, we've been there for however many months, you know, for a year now, year and a half. You know, I mean, Longwood's a project like that. You know, I mean, that's a big project for us. It's intense. It's demanding. It's going to be amazing when it's done. But we had to take a good look at ourselves and say, like, okay, what is this job really going to require from a process standpoint? It wasn't about could we get the job done.
Right.
It was about could we do the paperwork. And you know, that's something Ford has said many times, and probably on the podcast, is at this point there are a lot of jobs that it's more important that you can do the paperwork than you can actually do the job. Now, that wouldn't be true. Once, if you did all the paperwork and you got there and they realize you have no equipment, you're going to have a problem. But you would be there. You could be
Right.
there more easily than you could completely fail at the paperwork, but actually be qualified to do the job. In our modern society and the way things run now, if you can get through the contract documents and meet their specs and the requirements and their paperwork, they'll get you right to the site, and you might not even own a piece of equipment.
Mm.
But if you can't do their paperwork, it doesn't matter how many times you've done that job before, you're not going to get there because you have to meet their requirements.
Well, and back to, you know, his conversation about those three things. Part of our DNA, though, is to try things new, right?
Right.
You know, because I mean, we talked about before. I had a friend as a contractor. I got him a lead on a job, and he's like, "Oh, never done that before. I don't feel comfortable bidding that." And I was like, it was like basically, you know, I had a relationship with the owner, so it was kind of like, here, just do. He needs someone to do this. Like, go do it for him. And
Mhm.
he just didn't want to do it because of that. And so we're always looking for things that are a little outside of the standards for
Right.
jobs. We, you know, the things we like to do. Maybe it's something that isn't straightforward, so we can put our thinking caps on.
Right.
You know, we do like direct ownership communication, if the owner wants to do the project themselves. We like that just because it's a little different model than with the contractors. We're open to both kinds, but it definitely is a thing that, you know, we're constantly looking to refine that process as,
Mhm.
you know, everything is always changing. You know, there's 82 new apps that we can all use. Some of these apps make the subs pay for them. You know, there's just hundreds of different things that are constantly going on. But the reality is that I think the communication and trust, you know, it's old school. That's as
Right.
old as contracting is. But no matter how much paperwork there is, no matter any of those things, those are still probably two of the most important factors.
Well, and the key here, I think, is that we just want to go to work and do the work, and we want to be respected and appreciated in doing the work, and we want to be able to work for someone who we can respect and appreciate
Mhm.
and develop that relationship. But it's hard to do that with only the people you know when you're a growth-based company.
Sure.
Like, that's the reality. In 25 years, someday, you know, 25, 30 years, and Savannah's in charge, and, you know, we still do the same amount of work we do right now. Well, Savannah probably will do 90% of the work for people that she knows and places she knows with stuff she knows, because we got it to that point. But as we've grown regularly every single year, if I only did stuff with people we know, we'd still be doing only the stuff we know, which would have
Mhm.
been us, you know, the sandbox wasn't big enough.
So it's starting to sound a little bit like a podcast on love here. We're talking
Ah.
about how to build relationships. and
Build
you got to
relationships.
put yourself out there if you
Yeah.
want to get right, you gotta be open yourself up to getting hurt.
You got to be presentable
If you want
too,
to,
though. You know what I mean?
yeah, you gotta shave them every once in a while.
It's like it was that Saturday Night Live skit about, you know, the key to not getting in trouble. It was Tom Brady was on, and it was the key to not. It was sexual harassment. The way to avoid sexual harassment: be handsome.
Oh,
And it was
jeez.
just Tom Brady
Yeah.
in like a t-shirt and underpants. Just be handsome.
Just
He
be
never got in
handsome.
trouble.
Don't-
Fred
you don't get in
Armisen,
trouble. Mm.
as soon as he stepped in the room, sexual harassment because he was not handsome.
Well,
Oh,
no, and
my
I think
gosh.
that getting back to what we were talking about, it's like, you know, we've had some clients reach out to us because they've seen us on a job site. They've seen us, you know, our equipment looks appropriate. Our trucks look appropriate. Our guys were doing what they need to. And so, you know, we've talked about that multiple times with people seeing, you know, like, because we want to trust the people we're working for, but sometimes these new people that we might get to work with might see something that allows them to be interested in giving us an opportunity.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it goes both ways on that
Good point.
aspect.
Good
Well,
point.
yeah, and the guy's got to keep that in mind. You know what I mean? Everybody, when you're out there, You know, there's always eyes on us. People are always watching. You
Yeah.
know, it's going back to Longwood. They have so many meetings at Longwood, you really can't comprehend it. But Shay and Dylan and the guys have to be involved in every meeting because it doesn't matter what a contractor is doing. We are somehow related to it. Like you can't do it without us because we're too involved in every piece. And so it's important when you're out there that you're representing who we want to be, you know, who everybody that works here, I believe, is pulling in the same direction and understands what we want to be, and just represent that thing because we might get the next job because there was a laborer who cleaned up a rock construction entrance and an owner walked in and it was clean. You know what I mean? That might be why we get the next job. And we'd say, oh, it's because they know us. But the truth is it's not like it was an old boys club and they know us. They know what our product, they know our finished product, you know, and that's been something that as we grew, we had to, you know, you get bigger and then you try and figure it out and you get bigger and you try and figure it out. And one of the things that we've always wanted to pride ourselves on is that when you see a job site, you know, it looks like a professional job site. I won't go so far as to say, you know, it's our job site, you know, because there's a lot of good contractors out there and
Sure.
the equipment's parked nice and the site looks good and it's all rolled in. But if it doesn't, people are going to notice. They'll notice a mess. They'll notice disorganization and dysfunction. And we don't want to work for someone who's dysfunctional any more than a good company wants a dysfunctional company to work for them.
Right.
So I'll tell you a quick funny story before we wrap up here. So we were talking to this contractor out of the Carolinas, and he was telling us a story how he's going to go to this big, huge job. And he said, the client pulls up, and he said, both the guys' shoes were untied. And he said, so we go through the meeting, and he said, all I could think about is that this client's shoes, he said, one shoe happens, but he said both shoes were just untied and just sloppy. So he says, we leave, and I go to my guys that were with me, and they're like, oh, yeah, this is going to go. He said, this job isn't going. Like, what do you mean? Like, the client showed up with his shoes untied. Like, this guy isn't organized enough to run this job. And we were all rolling, and, you know, we were laughing and having a good time with this. But it was so funny about, like, the small details, and that's what you were saying.
Yeah.
The small details do matter. You know, not all the time, but that's literally what he noticed and how, you know, he perceived the project over something that was like,
right.
The guy could have slid in his shoes. Who knows what happened, but that was literally the piece that he pulled into.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you present yourself? Yeah. That's a great place to wrap it up. Thanks for joining us today, folks. We hope you got something from this, and we hope you come back for another episode.